Hey guys, it's Nathan from the Kentucky Cycling YouTube channel. Welcome to the next Zoom interview in the Kentucky Cycling Connection series. The focus of today's interview is going to be on bikepacking. As subscribers to the channel already know, at the heart of this channel is a desire to explore Kentucky and the surrounding region. And of course, there's lots of ways to do that, and day trips are great. But as I expect that we'll hear from my guests, there's something really special that happens as you begin to extend your ride into a multi-day adventure. And I think that's reflected in the fact that as of the date of this interview, the three most popular videos on my channel are multi-day rides that I've done on the Gap, the C&O, and the Katy Trail. For the purposes of today's interview, I was able to gather three cyclists in different parts of the state, or across the river as the case may be, who are actively promoting multi-day adventures by bike, either through administering a Facebook group designed to connect Kentucky cyclists who are interested in doing this type of riding, creating and publishing bikepacking videos to YouTube, or both. Something that all three of our cyclists share is a desire to see bikepacking grow right here in Kentucky, and I count myself among them. So I also anticipate that this episode will also be a bit of a conversation about the future of bikepacking in Kentucky. All right, without any further ado, let's meet our guests.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Robinson. I live in the Bowling Green area in the South Central Kentucky part of the state. And my Facebook group is the South Central Kentucky Cyclists, Bikepacking and Touring. And I basically created the group out of a need for others of like interest to get out and explore and do camp rides. Unfortunately, my work is my biggest constraint. I don't have a lot of time for multi-day rides. My group is just promoting cycling awareness. There's a lot of my friends that don't cycle are on there, and they're aware of we're all out there and having fun and enjoying it. I created the group to bring people together that may or may not be interested in doing it, but just want to learn a little bit more about it and just the camaraderie of a shared interest.
I am Denise Greer. I am in the Louisville area. Actually, I moved across the river, but I still claim Louisville with my heart. I got into bikepacking. I'm a bike commuter, and I don't know, it's something that really intrigued me. I started following adventure cycling like David, and I went out on my first solo, and my goal was to be able to bike pack from my front door. So that's kind of my focus here in the Louisville area, is I want to find opportunities for us to bike pack from our front doors in an urban setting to get out to nature. So I started my YouTube channel based on my bike packing, and my YouTube channel is Denise Looking Out. And I've been on a couple of different multiple day trips, and I record those dailies. I do fun little how-tos. I just want to get people excited about bikepacking because I think it's a great thing, and if I can get more people in my area of Louisville to bike pack, then the better.
Hey, I'm Erika Wierman, and I started bikepacking about 3 or 4 years ago, I guess. I was really just looking for a way that I could spend more hours on my bike. So I've been mountain biking for about 20 years and was just enjoying that so much that I needed an excuse to spend weekends or go on trips and spend just more and more and more hours on my bike. I've done stuff stateside and overseas, and I really started doing the YouTube thing just in order to kind of catalog some of my travels. I wanted the opportunity to be able to look back when I'm maybe too old to be able to do this kind of adventuring and relive some of these amazing trips. So I've kind of just grown it from that. And then I also started the Central Kentucky Bikepackers page on Facebook. And I did that also probably out of a little bit of a selfish need for more people to bike pack with, because my usual group isn't always available when I have a weekend off and I want to just take off and go bikepacking. So I thought, well, I need to make some more friends and try to spread the word about bikepacking, find some local routes that are doable for people of all skill levels, and make some new friends so that I can bike pack more.
So now that we've met our guests, I'm interested in attempting to answer the question, what is bikepacking? Bike touring has been around for a long time, but the term bikepacking is much newer and, as it turns out, can mean a lot of different things to different people. In fact, the folks at bikepacking.com put together a really cool video on this exact subject, which I'll include a link to in the YouTube description. In it, Neil, who's the host, explains that, and I'll quote, "This is still somewhat of a contentious question that has many different answers." And he proceeds by featuring a number of accomplished adventure cyclists and asks them what the term bikepacking means to them. So in that same spirit, I want to ask each of our guests, what does the term bikepacking mean to you?
So I recognize that bikepacking probably means something completely different to a lot of different people. And I think that that's great to have a little bit of an open-ended meaning to the term. To me personally, just because I don't like to ride road and I do prefer to be on single track or off road, to me, bikepacking is a little different from touring in that it tends to be more bags and less panniers and maybe more off-road and a little bit less of kind of what we would traditionally think of as touring. And that maybe the term bikepacking allows us to make a new definition because there's a distinction. But that being said, I think it's an inclusive term anyway. It can be whatever you want it to be. What's appealing to me about being off-road, obviously staying away from traffic is one thing, but also being able to see areas that you can't see by car or wouldn't see just going down the street. Being able to see a new location in a slow and off the beaten pathway is kind of what makes it so exciting to me. And that would be my personal definition.
I think Erika's hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's what I think of when I think of backpacking. Now, I will say broadly, like when I use the term bikepacking as a hashtag on YouTube, sometimes you do see touring on it as well. But for me, bikepacking, now I do have a traditional bike touring setup, but I'm using that usually in a bikepacking way. So I like off-road. I like not having to be on roads or using limited roads. Now, sometimes you've got to be on roads just to get from one trail to the other or one fire road to the other. And so that's what it is for me as well. It's being able to get on your bike and go places that you can't really get to by a car. And for me too, now, this is kind of contentious because traditionally when you think of bikepacking, it comes from the word backpacking, right? So it's traditionally bringing all your gear. So it's not necessarily the credit card touring that you see. Now, there are credit card bikepackers, but traditionally we're camping along the way. We're staying on the earth where we're cycling.
The wife and I love doing the Little Miami, and I think they both already pretty much mentioned everything is getting out, on a single track trail and not really having the cars. As I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of a roadie anyway, so that's more my thing on road cycling. But yeah, is just seeing things that you normally wouldn't see on a bike tour, and really just being out in nature. It doesn't really have to be any big epic ride or something. And people say, well, how do I even get started? And, I'm fortunate enough to live in a rural area, and I could ride for miles and really not see but just a few cars. But it can be just as short a trip as, riding your bike to your friend's house, camp out in the backyard. It doesn't have to be this huge thing, and, just kind of build up to it and just kind of get out and explore your world,
Yeah, I really like the way Erika sort of teed it up as having a broad and inclusive definition. I don't think there's a hard and fast definition to be found here. I'll say that what they kind of landed on, and I think it speaks to the fact that like adventure cycling really has all these routes that are kind of primarily aimed at road cycling, but have definitely hedged into, like at least the gravel and to a certain degree dirt road, space. And so I think where bikepacking.com anyway is kind of making their niche is where, the routes are either primarily single track, gravel, or dirt road, but not exclusively, right? So there definitely is overlap between the two. Maybe we can have a shared definition of just a multi-day adventure by bike. You know, if you're going on a multi-day adventure by bike, you're bike packing. Y'all take any issue with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I think it's great.
Not at all. And that's
Okay.
what I love about some of like the Facebook pages and whatnot, is that you have the opportunity to network with people and find folks that like to do the types of routes that you do. And there's, never ending variety in what people want to do. Just strictly road touring, credit card touring, all the way down to completely backcountry, no resupply options and everything in between.
Awesome. Now that we've talked a little bit about what the word bike packing means to each of you, I'd like to hear a little bit more from each of you about the kind of multi-day adventures by bike that each of you like to do, and a little bit about your preferred adventure bike and how you typically like to set it up.
Okay, well, the type of bike packing that I like to do is I love rail trails, canal trails. We have a whole system of trails around this world that are double track, single track, what have you. And I love those adventures. And a lot of them are already set up for multiple days. I can just go out and buy a guide for that specific trail. And so those are my favorites. And I'm working through a huge list that I have of different ones that I want to get to. As far as my bike, I may have the cheapest bike of everyone here because I have just a bike that I bought off of bikesdirect.com, and it is a steel tour bike, but it is an entry-level tour bike, and it's one that I have upgraded. So I took it to my local bike shop and set it up for how I ride for touring. So I had to change out the handlebars, change out the pedals, change out the seat, change out everything. So my bike is geared towards sitting on it for 8 to 10 hours a day. But, and then I do have like nice tires that can get me on any surface. So how I set mine up is I do use panniers. I have a rack and panniers on the back. And then on the front, I use a Swift Industries just expandable bag. I don't have anything on the middle. So I am set up more like a touring setup. Once I can, because I'm so new at this, I've been doing it for about 2 years, but I've been slowly buying gear to get myself lighter, I should say. So as soon as I can get a new tent to be really light, then I would like to switch to where I have the bag in the back versus using the rack and panniers to get rid of some of that weight.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that, Denise, because that's actually one of the things that came up in this bike packing discussion is that traditionally, you're kind of carrying not just everything you need, but everything you might anticipate needing.
Yeah.
You've got sort of the rack and panniers set up. And particularly as you move off road or to, more technical terrain, there's been an emphasis to try to get the weight down, to get the bike narrower, more agile. And so to a certain degree, it's about really just kind of getting down and carrying what you truly need as opposed to what you might start out thinking you need, right?
My panniers and rack do just fine. I will say, I did the C&O and, it's bumpy and crazy the entire way. And those did not rattle or shake loose once. So it was kind of the perfect setup for that trip because I needed a lot extra gear.
And I would really encourage people to kind of start with what you have. It's like, if you've got rack and panniers, it's a great place to start, and you can always refine. There's endless things that you can purchase. So a lot of supply of bags and whatnot along the way.
Well, the bike is a Surly. It's a steel frame, Surly long haul trucker. It is a 100% touring bike setup. What I enjoy doing the most is I'm about maybe 20, 30 miles away from Barren River Lake and about the same distance from Mammoth Cave. So I like to schedule a ride, and I typically post it on the group. Sometimes it's free camping, depending on if it's off season or whatever, but I'll just go in and buy the campsite and post it on there for anyone that wants to join us or ride along. You don't have to camp. You can show up, ride back home, and you're welcome to stay. But my bike setup is Denise mentioned carrying too much. Wow, I could talk for hours about all of that, but I run Ortlieb panniers on the front and back, 220 liters on the back, and 240s that I run in the front. I tend to like my setup a little bit heavy in the front. I feel like it kind of balances out a little bit better when I'm actually on the saddle riding, and it just makes the front end a little bit less twitchy. Denise mentioned the gear. One of my favorite things to do when I'm not riding is figuring out different ways that I can pack stuff and make it lighter or better, or it's something as simple as putting something inside of something else to take away that space and consolidate it down. And I'm constantly looking at new gear and thinking, wow, the first overnight ride I did, I had 4 full panniers stuffed full. And the last one that I did, I've been doing it about a year and a half now. I'm thinking, my gosh, what did I take with me the first couple of times I did this? Because I have 2 20 liters and I still have room in the back. So, and then I run an Ortlieb handlebar bag that you could pretty much live out of that. So I'm actually getting all that set up to do like the Natchez Trace. That's one of my goals. 444 miles. I really want to ride the entire length of that, and I would actually love to do the entire trip across the U.S. on the Transamerica Trail, but I just don't have that time off of work. But it's my setup is more a true road touring setup.
I prefer to bike pack off-road. Everybody who knows me kind of knows that's my passion, is to stay away from the scary cars and off the beaten path. But what I've really, really come to enjoy is a quite varied terrain. I find that I can get bored very easily with anything in life, honestly, and I just like constantly changing scenery and terrain. So most of my favorite trips are things like, I did the North Country Trail in Michigan a couple years ago, and that is almost all single track. It's got some sand roads and some dirt roads and a little bit of gravel forest tracks, but mostly single track, but with some varied terrain and varied scenery, different types of dirt and whatnot. And that was really fun. My favorite trip of all time, if anybody who follows me knows, that my trip to the UK was incredible. And there are many things about that trip and those routes that made it really superior for me, and is the kind of thing that I'd love to see come together stateside, and especially in Kentucky. The thing that was wonderful about that was that it was not so remote that you felt like you were in danger if you ran out of something. It was very kind of connected a lot of little towns and a little seaside spots, and there were lots of pubs available for meals if you didn't want to carry a lot of food. But it was constantly changing terrain. It was everything from trails to bridle paths, grassy lanes, farm roads, and we rarely saw traffic, but we saw an incredible variety of scenery. And that is like my ideal type of trip. My bikes, I should say, I guess, I've bike packed on a full suspension, on a hardtail, and on a gravel bike. And of those three, I tend to prefer a hardtail for most applications. One of the biggest things I have to consider is that I'm really short. I'm just over 5 feet tall. And so while I would love to have everything in nice, tidy little bike packing bags, my saddle is pretty close to my rear wheel. And so just this past year, I finally had to do what I thought was just absolute blasphemy and put a rack on my hardtail. And I tend to just use it to elevate my bags off of the wheel. I don't use panniers or anything like that because I like it to be a little more streamlined for single track riding, mountain trail riding. My setup changes every time, but I like the hardtail because there's not as much frame movement as on the full suspension, but I still have the front fork for off-road capability. I like about a 2.4 tire that's pretty chunky that can get me over anything. And then of course I try to keep it really light because riding on single track with a loaded bike is tough, but my setup changes constantly, everything from frame bags to handlebar setups. And then I usually just use some form of dry bag now on the top of the rack in the back, and sometimes fork mounts and things like that, just depending on the length of the route. It changes constantly. There are no rules.
I think Erika spoke to hers, but I'd like to hear from Denise and David. What is the most epic bikepacking adventure that you've ever been on?
I just did it. So my most epic bike trip so far has been doing the C&O and Gap from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. It was something where when I stopped, I was sad to stop. It took us a week, and it was just magnificent to ride. On those, it was crushed limestone. The C&O is kind of this more rural, just experience where it's very historic. So I actually love that we did DC to Pittsburgh because we were like riding through history, and history kept advancing as we went further. And just the terrain was so fun, and the towns we met that we experienced along the way, and the fact that there was camping right on the trails was just, it made it such an easy way to do this for a week. And I love the experience, and I actually want to do it again, but I have like so many more I need to do before I do that again.
At this point, just doing overnighters. The last one that I did, it was about 80 miles in 2 days, and I camped at Mammoth Cave. So, just the time constraints with work and everything. The wife and I have ridden the Little Miami, and we really enjoyed that. Denise mentioned, the trails and everything, and just not having the cars and the traffic. That was actually very nice. But mine has just been a single overnight trip to Mammoth Cave. It's about 80 miles total, and that was just about 3 weeks ago. So yeah, that's at this point. Let's redo this video next year, and I'll have way more stories to tell.
No, that's great. And I think really that you're kind of capturing the spirit of it, right? As you're going out and you're having an adventure. So absolutely no need to apologize, about your experience to date. But I think it provides a next segue, and Denise kind of hinted at this. So I want to know, what ride is at the top of your bike packing bucket list?
Mine would be the entire Trans Am Trail. I would love nothing more than to fly my bike out and rear wheel in the water and go all the way to the other side. Just finished up the Barbara Savage book that you had actually recommended, Nathan. And just, it's so inspiring. You see people of all ages doing the entire route across the U.S. And, it's just, there's something inspiring about just the challenge of that. And I think that's what's most appealing to me. I've driven across it, and I think that's why I like road cycling more than trails, because you can ride a road or drive a car on a road, and you don't really truly get a sense of the contours of the road and the hills. And you think, wow, where did that hill come from? I've been through here 100 times. And for me, that would be my epic adventure. It's on my bucket list, but one of these days.
That's great. Great answer.
There are a lot on my bucket list, so this is a little hard to narrow down. And I also have like my short-term bucket list and my long-term bucket list. So what I'm going to go with for this one is the Trans-Cambrian Way, which is in Wales, across Wales. And the reason I choose that, if you know me, you won't be surprised, is that I just was enchanted with Wales. Absolutely one of the most beautiful places ever. It is a pretty challenging off-road route, and it goes across the mountains and literally from the coast to the border with England. And it just, I watch photos and videos of it obsessively, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. So I can't wait to do that one. And that one you can do in a few days, and so I think it's actually really doable. It just means another trip across the pond, but I'm up for it.
So mine, if we talk about long-term, like trip goals, like epic trips, it would have to be the Chilean side of Patagonia. I've seen people bike pack there, and it's one where I would have to completely change up my setup because I would need a hardtail mountain bike to do it. But you can also rent those there, I guess. But that would be the long-term, like, oh wow, the scenery and just the beauty and the remoteness, and it's just, it's one of those places that that would be a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to do it. And there are guide services there, so I'll probably use a guide service to do that one.
Good deal. David, you may have already answered this question, but I want to ask a much more pointed question. Can you tell me about your favorite bike packing adventure that you've done in Kentucky, assuming you've done one? And if you haven't done one, maybe you can speak to one that's on your list.
Probably one of my best rides was over at Bering River Lake and Mammoth Cave. That's really in my area. It's kind of quick overnight stuff. I don't have to have a whole lot of time off of work, so that would be about it for me.
Sadly, I haven't bike packed in Kentucky. I actually had a route planned at Mammoth Cave. We were going to do that trail, the rail trail that's in Mammoth Cave,
Mm-hmm.
and connect some of the fire roads and stuff. But I had a family emergency come up, so I didn't get to do that one. So that will still be on my list to get done. I do a lot of coming out and back from the Louisville area.
Yeah.
So it's kind of harder to find those opportunities on the Kentucky side because, the urban core is so big that it's hard to get out. Because the one thing I like to do is bike pack from my house. Now, I will say from my house, I have done several bike packing adventures, but it's normally to southern Indiana and like the Indiana Knobs area and the state parks. There's a lot of local state parks that are in southern Indiana, and so I've actually done a lot of overnights to those because they're just a little more accessible to me than on the Louisville side.
The only bike packing I've done exclusively in Kentucky was at Land Between the Lakes, and I just went down there with a couple of friends. We started at the North Welcome Center, I believe it's called, and then just followed the North-South Trail down to Golden Pond Visitors Center and camped kind of in that area and then rode back the next day. So it was just kind of a quick overnighter. It was an interesting trip because we got poured on. It was like 95 degrees and we got poured on right when we got to the south end of the trail. And so it was definitely a learning experience because I found out which of my bags are not waterproof. And then we spent the night trying to get everything to dry out, but it was so hot and so humid that the next morning everything was just still soaked. So it was an interesting trip. But what I loved about that is that we do have a couple places in Kentucky where we have long trails where you can just easily pick a starting point and do an out and back for a quick overnighter.
Yeah, good deal. All right. So I do want to kind of talk about the development of sort of bikepacking routes in Kentucky. And I know Erika, this is going to be probably a little more up your alley. But in case people aren't aware, and I'll say that if you're not familiar with bikepacking.com, you can go out to bikepacking.com and you can find a wide variety of routes. And those routes have a difficulty level assigned to them, with I guess one would be the easiest. I don't think they have any ones. I mean, I think the easier ones are maybe like 4s and 5s in terms of what I've seen. And then they go on up to, 9, or they may rate them kind of according to like various, kind of metrics in terms of what they're rating it for. So it might be, 9 for this or 10 for this or whatever. But we've actually had some folks in Kentucky start to develop bikepacking routes, which I think is a very exciting development. And I think we're going to see more of this in the future. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of ones that are in existence today. And I know Eric and I heard of one that is kind of right around the corner. So if you're not familiar already, you can go out and check out 361 Degree Adventures. They're an adventure racing company here in Kentucky, and they've developed both a Red River Gorge overnighter, and to me, it's probably a little ambitious for my skill level to think about it as an overnighter. I might do it over a couple of nights, or actually, and I'm just going to plant a seed here, particularly for Erika. I'd like to potentially bite off a section of that is more heavily concentrated with gravel and single track, and maybe do what I would call maybe like the Red River Gorge overnighter microburst or something like that. I mean, it's like a condensed version of that. But great route. It's like an 88-mile route. And then there's a really ambitious route that is in Kentucky and Virginia called the Breakdown Bikepacking Route, also offered by 361 Degree Adventures. Just this year, we saw the introduction of our first route on bikepacking.com that is both in Kentucky and Tennessee, called the No Business Loop. And we learned that Austin Render, who is the organizer of the Bourbon, I think it was called Bourbon Country Burn, may now just be a Bourbon Burn road cycling event, is met with Neil from bikepacking.com and maybe some other folks. And there's going to be a route on the Sheltowee Trace that is going to be rated like a 9 out of 10. So very high, level of difficulty there. But you create a draw for us. So I kind of want to, talk about sort of what you all see as potential for the evolution of bikepacking in Kentucky. Any thoughts that you want to share?
I think that cycling in general over the last 2 or 3 years has completely exploded. And I think everywhere, not just in Kentucky, but and I think that's kind of putting everything on the map, that it's making more people aware that Kentucky does have a lack of trails and stuff for that kind of thing. And I think it's great to see the people putting this together. And I think it's just awesome. And it's great to see Kentucky kind of being put on the map in terms of cycling adventures, because there are people out there just like us that want to go out and do that might not even know where to get started. And so I think it's great seeing the development of all the trails.
Yeah, and I'll say, David, right up your alley in terms of road cycling and touring. Just this year, we've seen really the unveiling of a couple different additional U.S. bike routes. You referenced the Trans-America Trail. Also down in your neck of the woods, there's now also U.S. Bike Route 23, which comes up off the Tennessee state line, comes up through cave country in and around Mammoth Cave, and goes on up and meets with the Trans-America Bike Route, which is U.S. Bike Route 76. And now there's they had a grand opening of this. There's a U.S. Bike Route which closely follows the route that Daniel Boone took through Kentucky, called kind of nicknamed the Daniel Boone bike route, but it follows a lot of the Boone Trace, the original Boone Trace, which basically goes from Middlesboro, Kentucky, all the way up to Maysville. And of course, we've got this bikepacking route. But what are some other long-term visions that you all have heard or heard about, maybe, or thought about?
One of the things that I think that Kentucky has an immense amount of is we do have a lot of wild spaces still. That's not the case in some of our neighboring states. And the ability to do things like, gravel riding is so hot. Like people love gravel riding. And unfortunately, there is not a lot of record of great routes. So I think that you're going to see people developing more multi-day gravel routes because we do have that with gravel roads, fire lanes, getting from, we do have a lot of parks around this state. So maybe it's developing rides from park to park. So that makes it easier for overnight guests. Because the thing is if you can make this accessible for a lot of people, that's where you pique the interest for bike packing, is if you can get more people involved. Having advanced people involved is great, but where your bread and butter are, where you can start getting more local and maybe federal dollars, is getting just regular Joes that want to get out and try this, to get out on those trails. And so if we can map some safe, gravel, single track, and connect the dots of different things. Berea is now a certified trail town. So maybe it's, using that as a stepping off point. But definitely Kentucky, we have the amenities. We just have to figure out how to connect them.
Yeah, I love that vision. Erika, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just echo what they both said, in that there's definitely a boom right now. There's definitely interest. And if that becomes visible enough to our lawmakers and our government entities, then hopefully some of those spaces that we have available can open up, because part of the issue is, where bikes are permitted currently, putting the resources into making sure that these bike routes are safe, potentially places where we can separate bike traffic from road traffic. We do have it's a beautiful state, and it's a long state, where there's lots of room for extended routes through this state. So the big thing right now is visibility. There are a lot more people getting on bikes now than there were even 5 years ago. And it's a matter of bringing attention to the need of those cyclists so that we can, maybe try to do more rail to trail stuff, maybe do more bike lanes or bike paths. Specifically, the Central Kentucky Bikepackers group, we have, for the second year now, it's a young group, but for the second year now, we've done an introductory overnighter for beginners, and that was on the Little Miami. Ohio is killing it with the bike paths. That you can cross the entire state on a bike path that doesn't intersect with traffic except to go across streets. And it's a very safe place to take somebody who wants to try bikepacking for the first time on any kind of bike with any kind of gear, and feel like it's logistically simple. They don't have to worry about navigation, and, kind of give them a taste for what it's like to ride your bike to one location, camp, and turn around and come back. And there's no reason we shouldn't have that opportunity in Kentucky. I agree that we need to cater to the introductory level to get people interested. And I'm also really super pumped about like the Sheltowee Trace and some of the more advanced rides, because that's going to bring people, it's going to make Kentucky a destination for bikepacking, and it'll bring people in from other places. There maybe won't be that many people initially that want to tackle a 9 out of 10 route here in the state, but I would love to try to, get people to maybe try bits and pieces of it at a time, bring some attention to it, and then before you know it, we'll have some tourism based off of that sort of thing. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we have so much potential.
Yeah. So I'll just add in here. I'll answer my own question about favorite bikepacking experience in Kentucky. And this is really Kentucky and Tennessee, but we did a gravel overnighter down in the Big South Fork recreation area that actually started in Kentucky, went down to Tennessee, and then came back. And that's building off of some other routes that were out there on Ride with GPS. 3 other areas I think have amazing potential. Land Between the Lakes has not only the North-South Trail that Erika referenced, but also has to be the highest concentration of gravel roads in the state. And so I think it would be, those of us on this call may be involved with this at some point, but I'll say that what I really hope to see is a development of at least an overnight route, down there, that could be a combination of single track and gravel with very limited riding on the road. Another area, which I think Denise mentioned this, potentially going from one place to another. I think the Daniel Boone National Forest, you could easily piece together what would be a predominantly gravel route. Again, at least an overnighter, maybe multi-day, and then last but certainly not least, I think it was interesting. So we were having, Erika and I were on this panel where I think Erika's passion for bikepacking effectively turned what was a telling Kentucky's cycling story panel into a bikepacking panel, which is fine. It's I mean, there was a lot of peak interest in that. But one thing that Vince Carmen tossed out was this idea of we've got in the eastern part of the state, we've got the Dawkins Line Rail Trail. It's currently, I think, finished to the tune of about 18 miles, possibly another 7, I guess, going up to this. I think it's called maybe, I can't remember the name of the tunnel, but that once they open it, it's going to be 36 miles in one direction. And then very close by, you've got the Prestonsburg Passage. So he kind of tossed it out to them, which is a paved rail trail. So to try to come up with a safe way to to connect those trails together in terms of some type of bikepacking experience, I think would be really great. What advice would you all give to someone who wanted to get started into the world of bikepacking?
Most of the time, people ask me a lot, this exact same question. Most people have bikes already. You don't have to go out and spend, $3,000 on the perfect bike or the perfect setup. And even if you're bike touring or bike packing, it doesn't have to be a big, huge, epic ride. If you like camping, it's just a simple amount of gear. And my advice is just take what you think you're going to need, come back, throw it all away, and then take about a fourth of that and just go ride to your friend's house, camp in their backyard, or ride to your local park or something and schedule a campsite, and just kind of wing it and feel your way through it. That's what I've had to do, and just scour YouTube videos and just grab a bike and a backpack and strap it down, and you're on your way. And it's super easy to get started into, and it's really difficult to get out of because you get hooked on it and enjoy it and want to continue to do more. So that's my advice: is just grab your bike, a single bag, and just go set out on an adventure and kind of build yourself up from short rides to more longer distance rides.
That's great advice. Erika and Denise, anything you all add to that?
Well, I'll preempt this by saying there is a video on my YouTube channel about my top tips for bike packing. And I think a lot of them are very applicable to folks that maybe are just getting started. But I would reiterate that there is no right or wrong way to do this. There's no right or wrong bike, and there's no right or wrong route. So do what you're comfortable with and what you enjoy. I would suggest that if you're just getting started, that maybe pick a weekend when you know the weather is going to be nice, when you can pick an area that you're familiar with, so that you're comfortable with the direction that you're going and the navigation, and you have somebody that could come pick you up if things went wrong. But as long as you're not encountering things like bad weather, getting lost, things like that you can easily kind of eliminate, that's a good way to get started. And then you'll build on it, because every single time you'll probably change something about your setup. I still do 3 or 4 years in. Every single time you'll probably decide you need to do something a little bit differently. And so just evolve it slowly. You can dip your toe in and do a super easy route where you don't have to worry about things like making sure you have the right GPS data downloaded onto your fancy computer and all that. Just start slow. And if you love it, you'll know right away, and you'll kind of start to add gear, add knowledge, and your routes will get more and more complicated.
Yeah, I think, she nailed it. You really want to set yourself up for success that first time, because if you want to fall in love with it, if you get dumped on rain, if you can't find your way, if you experience mechanical problems. So one thing I'll say is, know how to change a flat tire. If you do not know how to change a flat tire, you gotta learn how to do it. And I'm one that I advocate learning how to work on your bike, period. Like knowing how to set yourself up so that you can fix the smaller things that go wrong with your bike. It gives you more confidence when you're out there and you're going further away. If I'm 10 miles away from my house, I know that if I have something happen, more than likely I can fix it where I can get back home. So that just increases your confidence. The one thing I'll say is to women out there, because this is something I experienced too. Don't listen to anybody. Just tune them out. Stop listening, because I had a lot of people tell me, I can't believe you're going to do that. It's so unsafe. You're a woman traveling by yourself, or you're a couple of women. You're going to travel long. No, just tune that out. Do what you're going to do. Experience it. My first tour, I left from my doorstep and cycled by myself to Charlestown State Park, which is only 20 miles from my house, and it was a great experience. So just get out there and do it. Is my advice.
Great advice. Well, I want to really just thank you all for being part of the Kentucky Cycling Connection series and for helping to promote bike packing in Kentucky and the surrounding region. Your energy is infectious, and I also encourage folks to go and who are either in Central Kentucky or South Central Kentucky to go and check out these Facebook groups and get connected with folks, because I think that helps too. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for the invite.
As always, we hope you found this content useful. If you did, please like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks.